The silence in the room hit me before anything else did. Not the kind of silence that comes from an empty house, or the kind you hear late at night when the neighborhood goes still. This was a different kind. The kind that means something is already over, even before anyone says a word. My wife, Sandra, was sitting in the armchair by the fireplace. Our fireplace in our living room, in the house I had spent 11 years paying off. She had a glass of wine in her hand. She was smiling, and the man sitting on the couch across from her, the man I had never seen before in my life, was smiling too. The folder on the coffee table between them was labeled with our attorney's letterhead. Sandra looked up at me the way you look at someone who has just walked into the wrong room. "Daniel," she said, "good, you're finally home. We need to talk." I was 54 years old. I had spent the last 26 years working as a structural engineer, getting up before 6 every morning, driving 40 minutes each way to an office where I designed bridges and overpasses that people crossed every day without ever thinking about. I had coached my son's Little League team for 4 summers. I had driven my daughter to every college visit from here to Ohio. I had never once missed a mortgage payment, a school play, a birthday dinner, or a single Sunday at church with Sandra's mother, who never once said thank you. I set my keys on the hook by the door the same way I had done for 26 years. "Who is this?" I asked. The man on the couch stood up. He was younger than me by maybe 15 years. He had the kind of easy confidence that comes from never having had to work very hard for anything. He extended his hand. Sandra spoke before he could. "His name is Garrett. And before you say anything, I need you to understand that this has been a long time coming." I did not shake Garrett's hand. I looked at the folder on the table. "What is that?" I asked, though I already knew. Sandra stood up and picked it up. She held it out to me the way you offer someone a receipt for something they didn't want to buy. "Divorce papers," she said. "I've already had them reviewed. It's all very straightforward, Daniel. There's no reason this needs to be complicated." Garrett sat back down. He crossed one leg over the other like he was settling in to watch something entertaining. I took the folder. I did not open it. Sandra's voice took on the tone she used when she was explaining something to someone she had decided was not quite smart enough to understand on their own. She had been using that tone with me for about 6 years. I had never said anything about it. "I know this is hard to hear," she said, "but I have been unhappy for a very long time. You are a good man, Daniel. But good isn't enough anymore. I need someone who actually wants to build a life. Someone who is present. Someone who is Sandra," I said. She stopped. "Where are the kids tonight?" She blinked. "Michael is at his apartment. Lily is at her friend's place. I asked them to give us space." I nodded. I looked at Garrett one more time. He looked back at me with the kind of expression that men wear when they want to seem sympathetic but are actually just waiting for the inconvenient part to be over. I walked to the kitchen, got a glass of water, and came back. Sandra had not moved. She was watching me with something between irritation and surprise, like she had rehearsed a scene and I was delivering the wrong lines. "Sign them tonight," she said. "Garrett has a place in Scottsdale. I'll be moving there by the end of the month. The house can be sold and we split everything, 50-50. It's all in there." I looked at the folder in my hand. I thought about my father, about a conversation we had in his study in Tucson when I was 22 years old, just before my wedding. He had poured 2 glasses of bourbon, something he only did when he meant to be serious, and he had slid a set of documents across the desk to me. "I need you to sign these before the wedding," he said. Not because I don't trust Sandra, but because everything I've built doesn't belong to just me, son. It belongs to all of us, to the family, and it needs to stay that way. He had explained the terms slowly and clearly. The mineral rights in New Mexico, the land trust in central Arizona, the commercial properties in Tucson that his father had started buying in the 1960s and that our family had been quietly expanding ever since. None of it was in my name. All of it was structured through a family LLC and a revocable trust that named my father, my uncle, my brother, and me as beneficiaries, but only as long as we remained in good standing with the family board. If I divorced, my personal share would be held in a separate protective trust. Not dissolved, not forfeited, protected, shielded from any settlement claim by a spouse. It had been reviewed by 3 different attorneys. My father had been careful. My grandfather had been careful. Our family had been careful for a very long time. I had signed the documents before the wedding, and I had never told Sandra what they contained. Not because I was hiding something from her, but because my father had asked me not to. He said it had nothing to do with whether he liked Sandra or not. He said it was simply how our family handled things, the way it always had been, and the way it always would be. The money is not a secret weapon, he told me that day. It's just a wall. You never need a wall until you need one. I had not thought about those documents in years. Not really. Not in the way you think about something that matters. They'd been sitting in a file at our family's attorney's office in Tucson, and I had mostly just let them sit there, standing in my living room with Sandra's divorce papers in my hand and Garrett watching from the couch. I thought about that wall. I opened the folder. I read through the settlement proposal. Sandra was asking for the house, half of our joint savings account, which held roughly $40,000, half of my 401k, and spousal support for 5 years based on my engineering salary. It was, as she had said, very straightforward. I picked up the pen she had left on top of the folder. I signed. Sandra's expression shifted immediately. She had clearly been prepared for more of a fight. Garrett uncrossed his legs and leaned forward slightly. "That's it," Sandra said. "That's it," I said. I closed the folder and handed it back to her. "Have your attorney file it." I went upstairs and I went to bed. I do not know what I felt that night. I had been married to Sandra for 26 years. We had built a home together. We had raised 2 children together. I had loved her truly for most of those years, and there was grief in that, real grief. The kind that doesn't announce itself dramatically but just settles into your chest like something heavy that isn't going to move anytime soon. But underneath the grief there was something else. A stillness, the same stillness I used to feel in my father's study when things were settled and clear. The feeling of a wall doing exactly what a wall is supposed to do. The phone rang at 8:14 the next morning. I was on my second cup of coffee, reading the news at the kitchen table. The number was local, but I didn't recognize it. I answered. "Is this Daniel Hartwell?" The voice on the other end was tight, controlled, but only barely. "Speaking," I said. "Mr. Hartwell, my name is Claire Prentice. I'm Sandra Hartwell's attorney." A pause. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." "All right," I said. "When you signed those documents last night, were you aware of the Hartwell Family Trust and the associated LLC holdings?" I took a sip of my coffee. "I'm familiar with my family's assets, yes." A long silence. "Then, Mr. Hartwell, the settlement your wife proposed was based on a financial disclosure you submitted 18 months ago. That disclosure listed your net worth at approximately $900,000, primarily the house, retirement accounts, and joint savings." That's an accurate reflection of my personal assets in my own name, I said. Mr. Hartwell. Her voice dropped. Our due diligence over the last 12 hours has indicated that you are a named beneficiary of a family trust currently valued at over $14 million in real and commercial property, along with mineral rights and cash holdings. Is that accurate? I set down my coffee. You'd need to speak with our family's attorney in Tucson about the specifics of the trust structure. The trust structure, she said, and I could hear her choosing her next words very carefully, appears to have been specifically designed to be marital asset proof. Our research indicates that the protective provisions in that trust have been in place since before your marriage. That's correct, I said. Your wife did not know about this. It was not a question. My wife knew that my family had assets, I said. The specific legal structure of those assets was a family matter, and it was not relevant to our household finances, which were managed jointly and transparently. There was a long pause. When Claire Prentice spoke again, her voice had the flat quality of someone recalculating everything they thought they knew about a situation. I need to advise my client, she said. I'll be in touch. She hung up. I finished my coffee. Then I called my brother in Tucson. She filed, he asked. She filed, I said. A beat of silence. Then how's she taking it? Her attorney is taking it hard, I said. Sandra doesn't know yet. My brother was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Dad always said you'd know when you needed the wall. Yeah, I said. He was right. I heard about what happened next from my daughter Lily, who heard it from my son Michael, who had gotten a tearful phone call from Sandra 3 days after the papers were filed. Sandra had sat down with Claire Prentice for a full review of what the settlement actually meant. The house would sell for somewhere between $450,000 and $500,000, depending on the market. Half of that would go to Sandra, plus the $40,000 from savings and her share of my 401k. Total, somewhere in the range of $310,000. $310,000 sounded like a lot of money, until you put it next to $14 million. Sandra, by all accounts, did not take the news quietly. She called Claire Prentice a fraud. She called our marriage a lie. She called me, and I'm told these were her exact words, a cold, calculating snake who had been hiding money from her for 26 years. What Sandra did not do, because Claire Prentice apparently explained this to her very clearly, was have any legal recourse. The trust had been established with Sandra's full knowledge that I had family assets. She had signed a general financial awareness acknowledgement before our wedding, something our family attorney had quietly requested as part of the prenuptial preparation, though Sandra had apparently not read it closely or asked any questions about it at the time. The wall had been built correctly. Every brick was in the right place. Garrett, meanwhile, had his own reaction to the news. I heard about this one from my brother, who had a friend in Scottsdale who knew people in the social circles Garrett moved through. Apparently, Garrett's interest in Sandra had been, at least in part, motivated by a conversation in which Sandra had described her husband as coming from old Arizona money. Garrett himself was carrying significant debt from a failed restaurant venture and 2 underwater investment properties. He had been, as the phrase goes, looking for a soft landing when he learned that Sandra's settlement was going to be somewhere around $300,000, not the multi-million-dollar split he had apparently been counting on. His interest in moving to Scottsdale together became considerably less urgent. Within 3 weeks of the filing, Sandra called Lily in tears to report that Garrett had stopped returning her messages. Lily told me this on a Sunday afternoon when she came over for lunch. She sat across from me at the same kitchen table where I had taken that phone call from Claire Prentice, and she looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Did you know?" she asked. "Before she gave you the papers. Did you know it would go this way?" I thought about how to answer that. I didn't plan anything. I said. I didn't set anything up. The trust has been exactly what it was since before your mother and I got married. I didn't move money. I didn't hide anything. I just signed the papers she put in front of me. Lily was quiet for a moment. She's really struggling, Dad. I know, I said. She's staying in a rental in Tempe. She had to get a job. She's working at a home goods store. I nodded. There was nothing I could say to that which wouldn't sound like either false sympathy or satisfaction. So I said nothing. Are you okay? Louis asked. It was such a simple question. I had been getting up every morning and going to work and coming home to an empty house and cooking dinner for one and watching the news and going to bed. I had started calling my brother more often. I had taken my fishing poles out of the garage for the first time in 4 years and driven up to the lake on a Saturday morning and sat in the quiet for 6 hours. I'm going to be fine, I said, and I meant it. What I did not tell Lily, what I had not told anyone except my brother, was that I had already made a decision. My father had passed away 2 years earlier. My uncle had stepped back from active management of the family holdings the previous spring, citing his health. My brother and I had been discussing, quietly and carefully for most of that year, what the next chapter of the family's assets was going to look like. There was a parcel of land outside of Tucson, 47 acres my grandfather had purchased in 1971 for almost nothing, that had recently been appraised at just over $3 million due to development interest in the area. My brother and I had been approached by a regional developer, and we had been taking our time deciding what to do. After Sandra served me divorce papers, after Garrett sat on my couch with his legs crossed, after the wall did what it was built to do, I called my brother and I told him I was ready to make some decisions. We flew to Tucson together in April. We met with the family attorney and with a financial advisor our father had trusted for 30 years. We sat in the same study where my father had poured 2 glasses of bourbon and slid documents across the desk. There was a photograph of my father on the wall above the desk. It had been there since I was a child. He was standing in front of one of the commercial properties on the east side of Tucson, squinting a little in the Arizona sun, wearing the same expression he always wore when he had just finished something he was satisfied with. I looked at that photograph for a long time. The house sold in June. Sandra's share came through as the attorneys had agreed. I moved into a smaller place on the north side of the city. A single-story house with a big backyard and a covered patio, and enough room for Michael and Lily to come visit whenever they wanted. I put a gas grill on the patio and a couple of good chairs, and I sat outside in the evenings and watched the sun go down over the desert. My daughter started coming over on Sundays. My son started calling more often. There were Sunday dinners and graduations and ordinary Saturdays at the hardware store and slow mornings with coffee and the newspaper, and I found in the months that followed that my life was not diminished. It was quieter, it was smaller in some ways, but it was mine. In September, my brother called to tell me the Tucson land deal had closed. My share of the proceeds, after taxes and attorney fees, was just over $1.2 million. I put most of it in trust for Michael and Lily. I ran into Sandra's sister at the grocery store sometime around Thanksgiving. She was in the produce section, and she saw me before I saw her, and for a moment I thought she might just turn and walk the other way. But she didn't. "Daniel," she said. "Carol," I said. She looked at me for a moment. She had always been kind to me. Out of Sandra's whole family, Carol had always been the one who said thank you and meant it. "She's doing better," Carol said. "She got a different job. Something in an office now." "Good," I said, and I meant that too. Carol hesitated. "I want you to know what she did, the way it happened. I told her it was wrong. I told her at the time." "I know you did," I said. "It's all right, Carol," she nodded. Then she said, "You look well." "I am well," I said. We said goodbye in the cereal aisle, and I finished my shopping and drove home and put everything away and made myself a sandwich and sat on the patio while the sun went down. My neighbor's dog barked twice from across the fence. Somewhere down the street, a kid was shooting baskets in a driveway. The air smelled like someone had a fire going. I had spent a lot of my adult life building things that would hold: bridges, overpasses, the small, load-bearing structures that people cross over every day without thinking about them. You build them to last, and then you let them do their job. And when they hold, you don't celebrate. You just move on to the next thing. My father had built something that held, and it held at exactly the moment it was supposed to. Not because he had been planning for betrayal, but because he had understood something simple and true, that the things worth protecting need to be protected before you need to protect them. I thought about that a lot in the months after the divorce. I thought about the wall. I thought about how it was never a weapon. It was never a trap. It was never even about Sandra. Not really. It was just something my family built and maintained and passed down. And when the moment came, it simply did what it was made to do. By the following spring, I had settled into a life I did not expect to be as good as it was. My daughter had started bringing her boyfriend over for Sunday dinners. My son had gotten a promotion at his company in Denver and called me from the airport on his way to a work trip just to talk the way we hadn't talked in years. I had started going to a Tuesday night poker game with a few engineers from work and a retired high school coach from my neighborhood named Roy, who told terrible jokes and always brought the best chips. My brother came up from Tucson in March, and we spent a Saturday out at the lake. We didn't talk about money or assets or attorneys or any of it. We talked about our father. We talked about growing up. We talked about nothing in particular for most of the afternoon, and it was exactly right. There was a woman in my department at work, a project manager named Helen, who had been divorced herself for about 4 years, who had 2 grown kids of her own, who brought homemade tamales to the office holiday party every December, and made better coffee than anyone in the building. We'd worked together for 6 years, and I had always liked her, but never thought about it much beyond that. Sometime in April, she mentioned that she had been trying to find someone to go see a concert at the amphitheater south of the city, and that none of her friends could make it, and she was thinking she might just go alone. I said I'd go with her. She looked a little surprised. Then she smiled and said that sounded good. It was a Friday night in May, and the weather was exactly right, that brief perfect window in Arizona between the cold and the heat, and we sat in the open air and listened to the music and talked between songs and got a drink at intermission, and I drove her back to her car afterward, and it was easy in a way that things had not been easy in a very long time. I'm not going to tell you that it was a grand new beginning, or that I suddenly understood something I had never understood before. I am too old for that kind of story. What I will tell you is this: there is a difference between a life that is comfortable and a life that is honest. I had lived in comfort for a long time without noticing how much of it was built on things I was pretending not to see. The honest life is quieter. It is less decorated. It does not have the momentum of a long history behind it, or the built-up warmth of a house where the same family has lived for 20-something years. But it is solid. You can stand on it, and it holds. My father knew that. His father knew it before him, and I understood it now, at 54 years old. Standing on my patio on a Sunday morning with good coffee and the sun coming up over the desert and my phone buzzing with a text from my daughter saying she was bringing her boyfriend for dinner and did I need her to pick anything up, I texted back that I had it covered. Then I sat down in my chair and watched the light change and listened to the morning be quiet and thought about everything I had and nothing I had lost and understood. In the way you can only understand things when you are old enough to stop arguing with them, that I had come out exactly where I was supposed to be. Some walls are built to keep things out. Some are built to keep the right things in. My family built both kinds, and I am grateful for every single brick. If you've ever felt like you gave everything you had to something and watched it be taken for granted, you know how Paul felt. You know how I felt. And if you're wondering whether that kind of loyalty ever gets recognized, I'm here to tell you it does. Not always loudly, not always the way you imagine, but it does. Drop a comment and let me know. Do you think Sandra deserved a second chance, or did she make the bed she had to lie in? I read every single one. And if this story meant something to you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Take care of yourselves out there. I want to be honest with you about something before this story ends. I did not win because I was clever. I did not come out the other side of this because I had planned some elaborate revenge, or because I had been waiting for years to watch Sandra fail. That is not what happened. What happened is much simpler, and I think much more true. My father made a decision decades before any of this. He built something carefully, maintained it quietly, and passed it down not as a weapon, but as a foundation. And because that foundation existed, when the ground shifted under my feet, I did not fall. That is not luck. That is the result of a man who understood that integrity is not just about how you treat people in the good years. It is about the structures you build, the choices you make before the crisis arrives, when no one is watching and nothing is on the line yet. Sandra made her choices too, and I do not say that with anger. I say it because it is the clearest truth I know. The life we end up with is largely the life our decisions build. One quiet choice at a time. Sandra chose to stop investing in honesty. She chose to stop building something real and start chasing something that felt exciting. And Garrett, a man who was looking for a shortcut, who saw a marriage as a financial opportunity, gave her exactly what that kind of choice deserves. Not punishment from some outside force, just the natural result of aligning yourself with someone whose only real interest is in what you can give them. I think about Daniel, about myself. At 22 years old, sitting in my father's study, signing documents I barely understood, trusting a man whose judgment had never failed me. That version of me did not know what those papers would one day protect. He just trusted that doing things the right way, the careful way, the honest way, was worth the effort even when no reward was visible. That is what I want to leave you with. Not the money. Not the trust, not the land deal or the settlement numbers. Those are details. What matters is the principle underneath all of it. The things you build with integrity, the investments you make in your own character, the quiet disciplines you maintain when no one is looking. Those things do not disappear. They wait. And when the moment comes that tests everything you are, they show up. Not dramatically, not with a speech. They just hold. I am 54 years old. I have a covered patio and good coffee and Sunday dinners with my kids and a Tuesday night poker game with a retired coach who tells terrible jokes. I have a life that is honest, and I can tell you from where I am standing that an honest life, even a quiet one, even a smaller one than you imagined, is worth every single thing it cost to build it. Take care of the foundations. The rest will follow.